So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Diasynou Fioravante. Dr. Fioravante is an associate professor of neurobiology, physiology, and behavior and a core faculty member at the Center for Neuroscience. She's also an affiliate faculty of the Institute for Psychedelics and Neurotherapeutics, an affiliate faculty member at the Center for Neuroengineering and Medicine, and she's a co-founder of NeuroFest, which is why it's appropriate for her today to help us celebrate and reflect on these 10 years. Dr. Fioravante studies connections among brain regions that are involved in thinking, learning, motivation, and sociability in order to uncover how genetic and/or environmental disruptions in these connections contribute to cognitive and affective dysfunction in adulthood and in neurodevelopmental disorders. An important focus of her work is on how the cerebellum regulates not only movement, but also the internal state and social cognition. The research has implications for our understanding of autism spectrum disorder and could pave the way for time-extended interventions that improve cognitive and emotional outcomes. Dr. Fioravante has received many awards for her research, including Brain and Behavior Research Foundation Young Investigator Award, the Brain Research Foundation Fay Frank Award, and the Hellman Fellows Award. Her research is supported by the National Institute of Mental Health. She's also extremely dedicated to training the next generation of scientists. She does amazing work for the Neuroscience Graduate Program, this year chairing our admissions committee, which is a tremendous amount of work to do well, and she does it very, very well. She also teaches many graduate and undergraduate courses, and lastly is dedicated to reaching out to the community at large. And as I mentioned, one of the founding faculty for the NeuroFest 10 years ago. So today she's going to be giving us an overview of our 10th anniversary theme, celebrating a decade of neurotech innovation. So please join me in welcoming Diasynou Fioravante.
Can you hear me okay? Great. Thank you, Mari, for that introduction. And thank you, everyone, for coming today. It is my great pleasure to be with you to celebrate a decade of NeuroFest. We launched the first NeuroFest at the Center for Neuroscience in 2015. Only at the time, it was not called NeuroFest. It was aptly named Brain Awareness Week, Neuroscience Public Seminars, and Hands-On Experience, which is quite a mouthful. The event was envisioned as part of the International Brain Awareness Week, which celebrates the power and progress in brain research. At the time, with a budget of $500 that was generously provided by the director of the Center for Neuroscience at the time, Dr. Cam Carter, our team of 20 or so volunteers and 4 invited speakers hosted about 100 guests at the Center for Neuroscience to learn about the brain and brain disorders. The event was a success, so we decided to keep doing it. Leveraging the positive feedback that we received at that event, we successfully applied for a grant to support our outreach efforts from the Society for Neuroscience. But even with that award, we were operating on a shoestring. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you what that means. Right? If you see here, because we could not afford poster easels, we went out to a yard and got some cinder blocks. And we used them to set up our posters. And because those cinder blocks were not heavy enough and they would tilt over, we actually put heavy objects like that tape dispenser behind it to make sure that it would stay in place. So we didn't have much, but we had a lot of fun, and our guests definitely enjoyed it. The funds that we had from that award, we used them in order to support our neuroscience trainees, and we started the first poster presentation awards that promote excellence in scientific communication. In 2018, 2 things happened that changed the way we were doing outreach. One, there was a new sheriff in town, Dr. Kim McAllister. She succeeded Dr. Cam Carter as director of the Center for Neuroscience. And with that new position, she had new director funds. And then the other thing that happened is we decided to change the name because Brain Awareness Week and Neuroscience Public Seminars and hands-on experience is such a long word. I proposed, and then we all adopted the name NeuroFest. So because Kim McAllister shared our passion for science communication and public outreach, she used her new director resources to sponsor and move from NeuroFest, from the Center for Neuroscience, which was no longer large enough to accommodate all our guests, to the Walter Buehler Alumni Center. That is an absolutely beautiful building. The problem is that because of its very high ceilings, there's tremendous echo. So people had trouble listening when they would go out to posters or they would go out to interactive booths. So then NeuroFest moved once again, and we moved to our current home, which is here at the UC Davis Convention Center. That was in 2019. In 2020, because of COVID, the event was canceled. And from then, all the way to 2025, through Zoom meetings, post-COVID Zoom meetings, our neuroscientists at UC Davis came together to give back to the community by educating our guests about progress in mental health research, artificial intelligence, memory and emotion, and novel approaches to study the brain. The conceptual and technological innovations of our neuroscience labs are way too many for me to mention in just a few minutes. So I want to apologize in advance to you and to all my colleagues whose groundbreaking work I just don't have time to discuss. I will just give you a glimpse of what we have achieved at the Center for Neuroscience and as a neuroscience community at UC Davis over this past decade. So this past 10 years, we have gained a deep understanding of how the physiology of the brain supports and unfortunately at sometimes compromises brain function. So with development of innovative tools, we now know how to analyze dynamic pictures of the brain vasculature, the arteries and the veins of the brain, to obtain a sort of vascular fingerprint of health. And we do that under resting conditions and in response to physiological stress. These fingerprints can then be used to assess risk for conditions such as stroke. Much like your blood pressure can be used to indicate risk for the heart, but much more accurately in this case. We are also innovating in the study of the aging brain. So collaborative efforts here at UC Davis have led to the development of automated methods for MRI-based assessment of risk for dementia and accelerated brain atrophy. The principle is simple and it is ingenious. So our nerve cells, like any other cell in our body, absorbs nutrients from its environment and expels waste. This waste has to somehow be removed from the brain. And the way that happens is through exchange of physiologic fluids in the space that surrounds the brain vessels. By developing techniques that detect the enlargement of this space, visible on MRI, we can assess the disruption of the exchange process. And that disruption is associated with the risk of dementia and brain atrophy. When it comes to the diseased brain, in our race to heal it, we have pioneered regenerative medicine approaches for Huntington's disease using adult stem cells. And you will hear more about stem cells later on from our co-chair. Also, the development of non-hallucinogenic analogs for psychedelics that can promote neuronal growth has fundamentally changed the way that we understand and we envision treatments for mental health conditions, such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and addiction. In the last decade, we have also made remarkable strides in understanding the mechanisms through which we acquire, retain, and recall information. With new approaches that are employing virtual reality, we understand now how humans learn to navigate novel environments and also how our navigation skills change with age and in pathology. By developing novel tools to explore the genome, we are shedding light onto principles of evolution, brain development, and neurodevelopmental disorders. And you will hear more about this from our next speaker. Tool developers on our campus have invented molecular technologies to sense brain chemicals that are important for movement and motivation, as well as mood and attention, and also to tag and manipulate active neurons. These technologies are currently used in animal models only, but they have already led to major discoveries in basic neuroscience research. Last but not least, this past decade has seen an explosion of computational neuroscience and neuroengineering at UC Davis. The computational approaches developed by neuroscientists in our community, together with innovations in brain monitoring technologies, have enabled patients to, for example, regain their voice. And you will hear more about those brain-machine interfaces by our two speakers in the second part of our event today. If you want to learn more about these innovations and anything else that is happening at the Center for Neuroscience and in our neuroscience community, I encourage you to visit the YouTube channel of the Center for Neuroscience and to reach out to our experts. Neither the discoveries I highlighted today nor NeuroFest would have been possible without you. What started as a small group of 92 guests back in 2015, it has now transformed into a sea of people, with over 3,000 people having attended NeuroFest in person and more than 185,000 views online. This is fantastic, but as our outreach grows, so does the demand for additional resources. In response to this, we launched the Center for Neuroscience Community Outreach Fund to support NeuroFest and other outreach efforts, including K-12 education. So I would like to thank the more than 100 generous donors that have contributed to this fund and have helped raise more than $20,000, which is a testament to the community's belief in the power of neuroscience education. With the support of those funds, we have engaged into activities like the Sacramento Brain Bee, and more recently, we have launched educational activities at the Museum of Science and Curiosity in Sacramento, MOSAC. These activities engage people of all ages and all backgrounds. So at UC Davis, we are passionate about our science, and we are passionate about communicating it. We believe that science isn't finished unless it's communicated. Unfortunately, recently, science has come under attack. So this is a picture that a friend of ours took in Sacramento at the State Capitol Museum in 2017 during the March for Science. This is yours truly, standing up for science right there. Yesterday, I found myself at the same site, going over another march, also standing up for science. By being here today, you are also standing up for science. So from the bottom of our hearts, we want to thank you for your support, your action, and your attention. So I will happily take any questions.
So how much has the funding cuts already affected you and your work and the work here at UC Davis? We read in the paper every day that funding for research, for supporting graduate students, and supporting the labs and the facilities that you work in are all being cut back. And you know, that kind of change, as you were advocating for there in that photo, is important to all of us.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. We have definitely been impacted by those changes, from the number of admissions that we are extending to our graduate students, which have been cut back and are shrouded in uncertainty at this point, to our actual research grants. Most of us are funded by the National Institute of Health, and those grants come in annually. So every year, you get a notice of award and you get your funds coming in. Back in January, all of those notices of award, all of those funds were frozen. So this means that labs that were waiting for their annual award in order to run their experiments, support their people, right, are now out of money. So we are running dangerously close to what will be a red line. Hopefully, and thankfully, there are some resources that can help us temporarily go through, but something needs to happen and needs to happen soon. And we're also hoping that through philanthropy and other means, by diversifying our portfolio, we will be able to overcome.